is Johan Haleby, and I am the founder and maintainer of this project that we're going to talk about during this presentation called Rest Assured. And I currently work at a company called Parkster, which is a mobile parking solution company based in Lund. And they are also sponsoring the development of this project now. So for that, I'm really grateful. And the agenda for the presentation will look something like this. So we'll start off with some HTTP basics, just to get everyone up to speed. Then we're going to have an introduction to Rest Assured. We're going to talk a little bit about Groovy, and especially how we can parse data structures in Groovy, because that's quite cool. Then we're going to show you a demo, and then we're going to see more Rest Assured patterns and some more more advanced stuff. And then we're going to end up with some more Spring-specific details in the end, for those of you who are using Spring. And of course, you can ask me questions anytime, so feel free to interrupt me. Oh, and I actually have a question for you. How many of you know about Rest Assured already? Okay, cool. How many of you are using it? Nice. I hope that there will be more. And for those of you who are already using it, I hope that I will still be able to, show you some good stuff that you don't know about. What we're just going to start very, very briefly with just looking at how a HTTP request and HTTP response actually looks like, because the whole purpose of Rest Assured is to make it easy to construct these kinds of data structures or data formats. So a request, at least in HTTP 1.0 and 1.1, is just a text document. And it starts with a request line that contains, let's see here if this works. Yeah, so it starts off with the HTTP verb. So this is like, post, put, delete, blah, 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 blah. And then it follows by the resource that you want to access on the server. And then you have a couple of headers. So there's one header that's required in HTTP 1.1, and that is the host header. Other than that, all other headers are optional. But headers are just like name-value pairs that are separated by a colon. And then we have an empty line and an optional message body or some content that you can pass. So here we pass some a nice SOAP message. And when we pass the request to the server, we will get a response back. And it's also a text document. And the first line is a status line. And it contains the status code, like 200 if the request was OK, and like 400 if it was a bad request or something like that. But other than that, it's very similar to the request. We just have headers again. There are no required headers in the response. And we have an empty line and an optional message body. So this is essentially what the HTTP protocol looks like. But we can not only send these text documents, we can also provide some parameters when we send our request. So one kind of parameter that I call a path parameter is something that makes up a path. So in this example, questions is one path parameter. Testing REST web services is another path parameter. And then, of course, we have these query parameters that you send. You specify them on the right side of the question mark. And these are also name-value pairs. So here we have one where source ID is equal to Chrome. And they're separated by an ampersand. And what's pretty interesting that I didn't know about when I started doing this was that you cannot represent query parameters or headers, for that matter, in a hash map, because at least not in a normal hash map that you have in Java, because you can actually have multiple names, or the query parameter. You can have two query parameters with the same name. That's possible if you want to provide a list, for example. So this is something that these libraries should be able to handle. Another common parameter type is the form parameter, And it's very similar to the query parameter, but instead of putting it in the query, you actually put it in the request body instead. And you should do some URL encoding of these parameters. Other than that, they look very similar. So here you can see that it's located in the body. But what you should also think about is that you should put this content type of application XWW form URL encoded with the request, so that the server knows that the parameters are sent as form parameters. So this is essentially what we want REST Assured to help us with. And we want to be able to test these kinds of, or we want to test services that returns these kinds of responses. So REST Assured is a library that is built on top of another library called HTTP Builder. But I've actually forked HTTP Builder. I don't know how much HTTP Builder there is left in REST Assured right now. But HTTP Builder is a Groovy library, and it builds on Apache HTTP client. And when I started doing this, I mean, there were, of course, other libraries around, but I thought that I could improve on those in the domain of testing. So REST Assured is my attempt of doing that. So it focuses on testing first with this PDD-like specification syntax that we will see soon. And yes, it's implemented in Groovy and Java, but for you as a user of REST Assured, you're not exposed to any grooviness unless you want to. So there's, you don't have to configure like any, I don't know, no Groovy configuration for your Maven builds and so on. It's just a standard dependency, and it's of course open source. So when I started developing this was actually in 2011. One thing that I thought was quite cumbersome was just to, I just want to make a request. Why should that be like 3 lines of code? I don't know. So I decided that why not just be able to do like this? I thought that was, that was easy enough. So this is, Java code, and this is REST Assured code as it's in its most simple form. But now, as I told you, REST Assured focuses on testing. So what happens when you make like a GET request to this Lotto resource is that we will default to localhost 8080. Because this is, port 8080, usually at least in Java, this is like the default port that you will run as a developer when you're testing things out in Jetty or Tomcat. So this is the default of REST Assured. So you will actually end up at localhost 8080/Lotto. But then you also want to supply parameters with the request. And here you can see a little bit more of the API or DSL. So we begin by doing this like given statement, and we say that we want to given this parameter, name1 equal to value 1, and name2 equal to value 2. Apply that when we do a GET request to /something. And you may wonder now, what kind of parameter will this end up as? And we were talking about query parameters and form parameters and blah, blah, blah. And this is, I've kind of taken the mentality here of server-side frameworks like Sinatra and Scalatra, because there you usually don't care about whether it's a query parameter or form parameter. I just want the value of this parameter. I don't care. So this is trying to get the same mentality for the client side. So here REST Assured will make these query parameters because we're making a GET request. And in a GET request, you shouldn't have a body. So this is like the natural choice for these parameters to end up. But if you use post and you specify param here, they will end up as form parameters. And it will automatically URL encode everything, and it will set this content type to XWW URL form encoded automatically. But then, of course, there are situations where you want to either just be more explicit, or perhaps the API takes both form parameters and query parameters at the same time. So, I mean, of course, you can do this as well. And you can specify path parameters as well. So you create this like little template with brackets. So what happens here, this is so-called named path parameters, because we explicitly define the name here. We say that the hotel ID should be equal to my hotel, and room number should be 23. So hotel ID will be replaced with my hotel, and room number with 23. So kind of straightforward. And here you can actually see an example of the full DSL. You can see here that we actually make some validation here as well. So we verify, or we validate that the HTTP response actually has a status code of 200. Otherwise, the test will fail. But in some situations, it could be nice to also just supply unnamed path parameters. So then they are index-based. So you just use a var arg here, and you pass in the my hotel, the value, and it will be replaced, or it will replace hotel ID, and so on. This can be a little less code to write, and can be convenient in some cases. But you can actually mix and match both named and unnamed path parameters. But why Groovy? Why did I decide to actually implement this in Groovy from the first place? And when I was introduced to Groovy, I mean, one of the things that I found was really cool with Groovy was how easy it was to extract values out of like JSON documents, at least compared to what I was used to in Java. So this was much easier. So yeah, as an example, so yeah, in Groovy we have something called a JSON slurper, and if you have a string or input stream or something else, you can just pass that as an argument to this JSON slurper. And if you name the instance created to JSON, you can simply extract values like this. So if you want to get a lotto ID of this JSON document, simply do JSON lotto.id, and it will return 5. And compared to what we had in Java back then, this was like, wow, this is super cool. And well, since this is Groovy, you can see here if we want to extract the winning numbers, you can see that it's a list. So we got a lot of winning numbers, and this is Groovy code. So now we must escape winning numbers. Otherwise, we will do lotto winning, minus number. It will try to do a subtraction, and that's not what we're after here. Of course, I'm saying, but maybe not of course, but it is of course. You can invoke functions on this data structure as well. So for example, you can find out how many winners were there in this lotto session. And this is pretty cool. The last line here, I think. This is, how do you query nested data structures? So like, if you go in here to this data structure, you go to winners, and then winner ID, it will match, it will return both of these values in a list. And this is really convenient and very powerful as well. It can really reduce the whatever. You get what I mean. Okay, so what I wanted to do was kind of to combine because I was using Java. I like Java, and I wanted to combine the kind of nice IDE feeling I got when using Java, but I want to combine it with the dynamicity of Groovy. I wanted to bring in this the easiness of extracting values from Groovy. So this is how it looks like with the rest assured API. So you do a GET request to Lotto, and we say that this Lotto resource returns this JSON. And then we can validate that the Lotto ID returned in the response is equal to 5. And equal to here, this is a standard Hamcrest matcher, if you're familiar with Hamcrest. I ship with JUnit, for example. So this is stuff that you may already know. And I think this is pretty cool. I mean, this is one line of code, and you're doing quite a lot of things. I mean, you're creating a request, you're parsing the response into a data structure, you're extracting a value, and you're actually validating something in one line of code in Java. It's pretty cool, right? Yeah, and of course you use. Here we extract the winner IDs again, and we validate them to another Hamcrest matcher that has items that you can use to check lists, and some small things, but you notice from the previous slide where we had to escape winning numbers. I mean, here we know this is a path expression. We know that we never want to do subtraction here, so all of this kind of well, at least most of these kind of things that you have to think about in Groovy when you're parsing or extracting values out of the JSON document. You don't have to think about that in rest assured. So that is pretty neat. But of course, you won't typically do one GET request per thing you want to validate. Usually your test looks something like this. So you do a lot of assertions for one request. And you can do this, but you should do like this. And the reason for that, I don't know, maybe it's a bit subtle, but here we actually have multiple statements. So if the first validation here fails, it won't check the remaining ones. So you can have multiple errors, but only the first one will be shown. So if you use this approach, all of the errors will be validated at the same time. You will get one error message for all your errors. So this is the recommended way of doing things. And so what's cool with this is that this kind of GPath expressions, as they're called, they also work on XML data structures. So if you know how to parse JSON, you also know how to parse XML, more or less. XML is a little bit more tricky because it has like attributes and stuff. And for example, if you look at this attribute here, you can see that it's 2006. And we as humans, we can interpret this to be an integer. But we don't know this from the XML parser perspective if we don't have like a D2D or schema or something. So this makes XML a little bit more complicated, but it follows pretty much the same thing that we had in JSON. So that's pretty cool. You use this like at character to extract attributes from the XML. So yeah, and here are just some like convenient stuff. So in order to get the last car of this list here, you can do -1. This will, in Java, this will like, I don't know, blow up with some form of exception. And if you want to get like the first 2 cars, you can create a range query like this. That is pretty convenient as well. So I think this is super cool. And I know that you're saying like, can this really work? This is too good to be true. I mean, yeah, I know you're shaking your heads and all, but I will show you. Well, okay. So let's try this. What I want to test here I have like a simple get resource for greet JSON, and it returns a JSON document with the greeting first name, and it takes a parameter called first name, and yeah, just returns me this little nice greeting here. So we want to validate this with rest assured to see that it works. So we do given, parameter first name Johan, and then we do last name Haleby. And we want to apply these parameters when we do a GET request to greet JSON. And yeah, now we can validate that the status code is 200 and that the body should have a greeting first name equal to Johan. Yeah, and now I'm not gonna do that. And the last name equal to Haleby. And hopefully this will be a green bar when the compilation has completed. And now it's no. What? Oh, wow. How is that possible? Maybe it does return that. Can you see what's wrong? That's strange. I was thinking, should I do a live demo or not? maybe I shouldn't do that. Bastard. XML Path. What?
Does it actually pick up on the...
Sorry?
Does it actually pick up on the class? I mean, it doesn't seem like it actually...
XML Path. Ah, no. This was not good. Okay, so what you should be able to see is a green bar, and you should see, then I should, change this to Johan and Haleby 2, and you should see like really nice error messages, nicer than the ones here. I don't know why this doesn't work. And the cool thing that won't work is if I were to copy this, you can like ignore this kind of strange thing. It does work. I don't know why it doesn't work now. I promise you it works. Okay, so if I go to greet XML, bastard. Oh, you can see some nice XML here, blah, blah, greetings, blah, blah. It looks very similar to the JSON thing that we saw. So we should be able to just copy this and change this to XML. And we get another green bar. You can imagine like how it will look like. Really cool, really, really nice and simple. And yeah, you get the idea, right? Why doesn't it? I'll try it one more time. I don't get it. How is it possible? I've done this like 1,000,000 times. Man up. Yeah, I don't know.
You get 503, isn't that service unavailable?
Yeah.
It's a compilation error. Yeah, it's a compilation error, It's Scala. So, but yeah. Okay, but I can show you afterwards, and I will promise you that it works. But actually, I won't. Compiling this takes forever. There's Groovy, Java, and Scala in the same project, and it's quite slow. But okay, so that was failed demo attempt, but
We trust you.
thank you. Yeah, it's bound to happen sooner or later. Okay, so you saw how cool it was with all these like JSON and XML, parsing with GPath, or at least you imagine how cool it could be. But maybe you're more like familiar with XPath. So if you're more familiar with XPath, you can use XPath instead. So then you just use this has XPath hamcris matcher. So that's pretty cool. And this is also pretty neat. Like if you have an XML schema or a DTD, perhaps you just want to validate that the response conforms to this schema. So yeah, that's also very simple. I mean, you just use these hamcris matchers, matches DTD or matches XSD. And well, DTD here, it can be a string or an input stream or file. And it just works. You can actually do the same thing with JSON, because JSON also has something called the JSON Schema. And here you can see an example of a JSON schema. And if you want to validate that your response conforms to your schema, you just use this hamcris matcher here, like matches JSON schema and class path, and you pass in your the path to your JSON schema. And this is actually a separate module. You have to import this from the outside of core rest assured, but it's just another maven dependency. And this is pretty cool. And I know you're all wondering what happens if you just do like get lotto. What happens? Is anything returned? Yes. A response is returned. And with this response, you can do all the things that you would expect. Like you can get all the headers and cookies and status line and so on and so forth. And of course, we can also return the body of the response. But here you can see that we have, this is pretty verbose. This is like 2 lines of code. This goes against everything that rest assured stands for, more or less. And so there's of course a shortcut for this. So you can do get lotto as string, and it will return the body like this. Yeah, or byte array if you prefer, or an input stream. So yeah, you have to like close this input stream yourself, but this can be really useful. And this is also quite cool. I mean, it's quite concise. I mean, you can map the response body into a Java object by just doing get as lotto.class, and yeah, just works. And this is also really cool. If you do get lotto and you're only interested in a single value, you're doing the sole purpose of doing this request is to extract the lotto ID. Then you can just use this shortcut. So you want to get lotto and the path lotto.lotto ID, and it will return the lotto ID. Nice. And yeah, this there's actually this is its own project, this JSON path thingy. So if you're only interested in using this for parsing JSON, you can do that. So you just do JSON path from some string or input stream or file or whatever, and then you can extract multiple values from the JSON document. And the same thing goes for XML path. Yeah. So here's another example where we extract something from an XML document. But you want to do more things with the request. So for example, you want to specify a request body, and that's also very easy. If you have a string, just apply it to the body. And the same thing goes for a byte array. And if you want to construct JSON and send that in the body, this is what very common thing to do. One way to do that would be to just create a hash map and put some values in the hash map and supply the hash map to the body. Then it will serialize this to JSON if you have specified the content type to be JSON. If you specify the content type to be XML, this will render XML instead. Another way to do it is just to create, if you have your Java DTOs, so you can just apply an object to body here as well. And rest assured, uses some, it supports a variety of different mapping libraries, so it will check the class path to see which one you have in class path. But you can specify one explicitly, so you can say that, okay, for this request I want the JSON to be used, for example. And you can configure all of these things for all of your tests as well. Yeah, just one last thing, because I think this is pretty cool. So if you have this DTO, you can actually pass that as a parameter as well, if you want to do that. So it will actually get serialized as a form parameter in this case. But many times you also want to upload some larger files. And this can be a little bit tricky in some other libraries. A couple of lines of code. But with rest assured, it's easy. And yeah, I'll skip that. And here we can see what we do is that we specify multipart, and then we send the file as an argument. So now this file will be uploaded using multipart uploading to the server. And you can have multiple multiparts, so you can upload many files at the same time, or you can have a multipart for a file, and then you can upload a JSON at the same time. So it scales pretty good. Another thing that you typically want to do is to provide some form of authentication. And rest assured ships with these kinds of authentications. So you have basic authentication, form authentication, that yes and no of, and you can roll your own as well if you like. Yeah, this is how it looks like. It shouldn't be harder than this. So this is basic authentication. Here's a certificate. So you just pass in the URL to the certificate and the password, and there you go. And I mentioned that you can do a lot of configurations in rest assured, and one way to do it is to do it statically. So in this example, we set the base URI to be myhost.org, and port to be 80, and the base path to resource, and we want authentication to be basic authentication. And now this configuration will be applied to all of your requests that you make with the REST assured. So now if we make a request to /xml like this, what will happen is that it will actually go to http://myhost.org with port 80 /resource/xml, and it will use basic authentication. So that can be pretty convenient as well. And you can do a lot of these configurations statically or for a single request if you like. And you can reset it as well. Another thing that is very common is that, well, say we have this example, we're getting like a book with ID 22, and we pass in a query parameter and cookie, and we validate that it's, the request body should be equal to catch 22. Okay, and then we have another test that goes to the same path but a different ID 42. Then you can see that we have the same query parameter and the same cookie. So now we are repeating ourselves, and we don't like that. So what we can do instead is to create a specification. Here's an example of that. So we create a request spec builder, and we add a query parameter, and we add this cookie, and we build it, and then we supply the specification here. So we don't have to repeat ourselves. And there is one, request specification, and there is one for, responses as well that you can use. And a new feature is this, that you can easily measure the response time. So all you do is, get lotto and then time, and it will return the time in milliseconds. Or you can pass in seconds, like this time unit here, normal Java time unit. And you can also use this in your validations. So that is pretty nice. And this is also very cool. So here we have a small JSON document, and if you look closely, you can see here that the link ends with the value of user ID here. And this might be, some constraints that you have in your service. I mean, this should be true. So what you can do is to supply a lambda expression here. So you can use the response to extract other parts of the response. So this is pretty neat. So you can here we just look at this. So here we have we use the response to extract the value of the user ID, and use a handcross matcher here. To validate that the href is what it's supposed to be. But there are some, this is stuff that you do a lot of, so there are some conveniences. So you can, for example, use this ends with path. So you can now validate that href ends with the path of user ID. And these are composable as well, so you can compose, normal handcross matchers with these special matchers that are available on REST assured. You can combine them in any way you like. So here we actually validate that the link starts with the localhost 8080 and ends with the user ID. And yeah, let's move on to some little more advanced use cases. And for this, we need to know a little bit of Groovy, because what we want to do now is to, for example, ask this document, give me all the items that is in category groceries, for example. So these are things that that can be really useful. So in order to do this, we need to know a little bit of Groovy. So the first line here defines a list in Groovy. And essentially, now what you can do is use something called find all, and this is the same thing as filter in Java 8. So it returns all elements here that match this predicate. And IT here is an implicit variable. So we don't have that in Java, but in Scala this is like the underscore. So for each iteration here, it will replace, in the first iteration it will replace u1 with IT. And so it will run u1.length greater than or equal to 5. Yes, that is true, so that will be retained in the list. And we will get this result. And if you use find instead, it will only return the first element that matches this predicate. So in this example, that will be U1, because U1 is the first element that matches the predicate. Then we can use collect, which is the same thing as map. I think collect is not a really good name, but that's what it's called. So here we map each element into an integer. So in this case, we will have 5, 7, 3, and 4. And yeah, then you can do like a sum. So then we just like sum up the elements in the list here. So we got 6. So now we can use this in our queries. So let's see how we can actually solve this. The thing that I was talking about before. Like how do we validate that items of category of type groceries are chocolate and coffee? So this is how we can do it. So now we make use of these functions on the data structure and closures from Groovy here. So we're going to shopping category and we want to find the category whose type is equal to groceries, and if we find one of those, we want its items, and they are returned as a list. And since they are returned as a list, we can use this as items anchors matcher to validate that the results are what they should be. And this works similarly for JSON as well. So here, for example, we find all the books that has a price less than 15, and we want to get the titles out of those books. So this is how we can do that. It's similar to XML. Or, for example, you can get the price of the cheapest book by using something called min function. And now I want to show you this because you can see here that we are repeating ourselves. We have store.book here on 2 places. So what you can typically do now is that you define a root path. So you say that the root path should be store.book, so you don't have to repeat it on the other expressions here. So that's pretty convenient. And now I'm going to skip forward a little bit because I want to show you there's another module in Rest Assured. So if you're using Spring, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but Spring has a library called the mock MVC that you can use to unit test controllers in Spring. But Rest Assured provides an API on top of that. So you can actually use the Rest Assured API to unit test Spring MVC controllers as well. And yeah, this is a Spring controller. We don't have to go into how it works, but here you can see how we test it. And here we say that we want to test this greeting controller in isolation. So now this is a unit test. We don't send any actual HTTP requests. So this will be much faster as well. And you can do this kind of static configuration as well, like you can with the normal Rest Assured. And if you have multiple tests for this greeting controller, and you have defined that in the configuration, I mean the test will look exactly the same, at least for these simpler cases, as with the normal Rest Assured. And there are some nice conveniences if you're using like Spring Security and stuff like that. And so one of the benefits of using this is that it's simpler to start the environment. You don't have to configure like Yeti servers and stuff like that. It also simplifies mocking. So if this greeting controller would have a dependency to a database, you can easily just swap it out. And the tests are faster. You can test the controller in isolation. Yeah, as I said, you get good Spring Security support. You don't need to learn. I mean, if you're using this API and you're already familiar with Rest Assured, I mean, you don't have to learn an additional API to be able to use these things. And all of the building blocks that Rest Assured provides, or most of them at least, will work here in the mock MVC version as well. And if you decide that, maybe I don't, maybe I migrate from Spring to Drop Wizard or something, then you don't have to, change your tests, or at least it's easier to migrate your unit tests into, integration tests instead. So that's also a benefit. But of course there are some drawbacks with this module. It doesn't support all of the features that mock MVC supports, but I think it supports most of them actually. And yeah, it will be a larger dependency. I mean, this depends on Groovy and other stuff, so that could be of importance to you. And I'm coding as fast as I can, but there will probably be some feature lag when mock MVC releases some new features. I will have to implement that in Rest Assured as well. And this is not a drawback of Rest Assured, but when you're doing these kinds of tests, it can be a little deceiving because you have to apply like filters and authentication and stuff like that manually when you're doing like unit testing of this resource. So you should have at least some integration tests, even if you have, even if you only want to write unit tests perhaps, but you should have both. And I want to end this session with another module that is brand new, and I think this is really neat because Spring has a project called Spring REST Docs, and this is not coupled to Spring MVC at all. You can use this for any library. This is just for documentation part. But in version 1.1, milestone 1, which is available now, you can use this. So what happens here is an example. So now you can supply. This is from the Spring project. We have a JUnit REST documentation JUnit rule. So you can apply that as a filter to Rest Assured. And you can, this is what you do here, and then you can supply some documentation hints. So as we know, like if we do GET request to / we will end up at localhost 8080, but we don't want localhost 8080 to end up in the documentation. Here we want we want to replace localhost 8080 with https and api.example.com and want to remove the port. There are a lot of stuff that you can put here. But what's so cool with this is that we will get like automatically generated snippets that we can use in the documentation. So here is an example. This is ASCII doc. So here we include the snippets that are generated when we run the tests in our documentation. And in the end, it will look like this. So here you can see that this is actually generated from our tests. So this doesn't lie. I mean, we get an example how to actually call this resource by using curl. Okay, this is how you do that, and it generates the request automatically. Here you can see that it sets an accept header to text plain, and the reason for that is that we have the accept header text plain here. So that is pretty neat, and also you can get a you see here an example of the actual response. So now you can hand this off to, I don't know, a client developer or something that can use this when he or she makes a request to your API. So I think this is really cool, and it's brand new. And yeah, this is what I wanted to show you today, plus a working demo. But I hope that you think that this is, cool and useful. Because I really think so. So, and if you think that it's really cool, you should, pull request away on GitHub, because it will be nice to have some more committers on this project as well. So, you're very welcome to do that. But yeah, if you're interested in it, go to restassured.io, and I blog at this URL here as well on Rest Assured and other stuff. Okay, do we have any questions? Do we have time for questions? Okay, do we have any questions? Or
Yes. What about OAuth?
Yeah, what about it?
How does it work, the testing?
Yeah, Rest Assured uses another library called Scribe under the covers. So everything that you can do with this Scribe framework, you can do with Rest Assured as well.
Okay.
Any other questions? I mean, I've been saying this a lot, but it's Rest Assured is so simple, so I can understand that you don't have any questions. I mean, it's straightforward, and it works. I mean, even though I have to point that out, I promise you it works. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for attending.